Hello students, here we are at the start of the final week of instruction. So I have revised the module, the agenda for week 13. I'm going to tell you about a couple of things that have changed, and hopefully none of these changes will be upsetting to you. They'll actually be a relief to you. So the first item on the agenda is the Huxley half of the Huxley-Lester model of visual communication. So in week one, you're introduced to that as one of the ways to approach visual communication, as opposed to sort of an environmental model or the Gestalt model, etc. So we've seen Lester, and we haven't really seen Huxley yet. So you're going to see Huxley two ways this week. And so the first one is that there is a PowerPoint. It's maybe, I don't know, it's about 50 slides. It's actually a PDF, but it's a bunch of slides. And it tries to communicate the Huxley portion of the Huxley-Lester model. And then there's another PowerPoint later in this module, and I will be producing a video about that to explain, what Huxley got right and what Huxley got wrong. He got some of the physiology dead wrong, but people would say he got some of the philosophy quite right in a almost prescient fashion. All right, I'm going to assign one more reading. It's a chapter from a book by Todd Gitlin, who is sort of a very influential media theorist. If I wasn't sort of pressed for time, I would have you answer some discussion questions. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a video in which I address the discussion questions that are also listed in this module. So I'm going to ask you to read that chapter by the Wednesday, April 25th. And then what I will do is by the evening of Wednesday, April 25th, I will produce a video where I address those discussion questions to try and fill out any gaps that you might have experienced as you were reading the chapter, because some of what Todd Gitlin writes is a little heady, but basically it all makes sense. Instructions on composing your takeaways from the BASMLs and revised due date. So the syllabus said that your report, and it's just like a one-page report where you're summarizing what you noted in your visual affordances of social media log over the past 13 weeks. So it's a one-pager, but there's a PowerPoint in there that reminds you what affordances are. And also, what I did then was I had, probably the first time I taught this, I had about 20 students in the class. So they identified a variety of affordances. And then what I did was I put notes in red in the PowerPoint saying, well, that's not necessarily a visual affordance, that's more like an evidentiary affordance. But again, visuals can work in an evidentiary capacity. So the point of this is I'm hoping to get you to focus. So when you talk about the affordances of the social media that you have tracked over the past several weeks, that you really sort of concentrate on the visual affordances. And then remember that as a user, you have two possible directions on that visual affordance. There is what you can see by being someone who follows people on Instagram, or you're friends with people on Facebook. And then there's what you can have seen by others. And so those are the two sides to the visual affordances of the social media. A request to call or write about your final project. So I'm going to send an email out, and in the email it's going to give you my cell phone number, which has actually been on the syllabus all along. And I'm going to ask that you either respond to the email and tell me that you have no questions about the final project and you don't need any more guidance on it, or if you've got specific questions, write me those questions in the email, or let's talk on the phone. Sometimes that's a more efficient way to do it. So my schedule now is quite free, except for the fact that on Wednesday I will be in class, the other class that I teach, from say 1 p.m. till 4 p.m. And then tomorrow, Tuesday morning, I'm unavailable from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. because that's where I am now going and doing my magnificent watercolor painting, which if you follow me on Instagram, you can see I'm making great progress. Actually, I'm not ashamed of the progress I'm making in watercolors. All right. So you'll get an email that says, final project. Do you understand what's expected of you and what I want? Now, I've made revisions to the deliverables for the final project. It was always worth 25% of your course grade, and it's still worth 25, but it used to be 10% for the written report that says what you're going to revise and why you're revising it, etc. And then it was going to be 10% for the visuals, which would have been, for the most people, there were PowerPoint slides, or they could have been Google presentation slides, or it could be a website. If you're adept at making a website, you could make a website. And so that was often called the project binder. And then 5% was for the oral presentation. Well, I had you present orally for one of your projects, and it was okay, but I could see that in this online setting, I think we can dispense with the oral presentation. So now what happens is the 25% for that project is just going to be evenly distributed, but you're going to submit two different files. One is the written report, which is sort of the rationale and your theorizing of why you chose that company and what you're changing, etc. And then there's the collection of its PowerPoint slides or its Google slides or it's a website where we actually see the changes that you have made. So it'll be a submission of two different documents for this one final project assignment. Okay? So I think that's all I have to say to you at this time. So I will save this and post it, and then I will send that email. And I'm looking forward then to hearing from you via email or having a phone conversation with you so that I'm confident that you have no questions about what I'll be expecting next Monday, which would be April 30th, in terms of the two parts of the final project. And so then I moved the due date for the VASML until Friday. So you got Friday before you have to come up with just a one-pager summary of what you noticed about the visual affordances of the social media that you've been paying attention to over the past 13 weeks. Okay? So soon you'll get an email from me.